Hello. So I'd say this is probably a clip for the differentiation connoisseur. Somebody who's seen the previous clips in the sequence, likes the concept and would like to explore maybe the finer points of it. I'm going to talk about strong and weak student pairings. It had to come up sooner or later. In a way, I feel that it's often teachers' go-to pairings when they're trying to make things work. And that really is what strong, weak pairings end up being a lot of the time if we're not careful. Just a way to get the job done, to get things working, to survive. The thing is, if you ask yourself, what is differentiation? You have the answer probably, it's helping students at all parts of the ability range achieve similar goals, achieve some progress towards a common goal. It's a way of helping each student learn something relative to themselves, learn as much as they can. Now, my definition of differentiation, my idea is very much based on small interventions in the moment. The thing is though, if you think about a pairing, when you've put a strong student with a weak student, most of the time it's to help the weak student. And you're using the strong student as a kind of deputy to basically do your work for you or to help you. Now that's fine, that's going to help the struggling student, the weaker student. But is it going to help the stronger student? My argument is that a lot of the time, if we're not careful, it actually doesn't help the stronger student very much. They don't get much out of it. So that stronger, weaker student pairing or advanced, struggling student pairing is actually a logistical strategy, but not necessarily a good example of differentiation. So fine, I say, if you need to do that, do that. But at the same time, and I do it myself, but at the same time, we have to realise that that is possibly not differentiation at the high art form end of the concept, because the stronger student is probably not benefiting. There are, however, some little tweaks. Now, I do obviously, let me stress, I think this is one of the hardest things to get right. And it's one of the hardest things to make sure that both of the partners in a strong, weak, advanced, struggling, it's the same thing, partnership are actually getting something out of the arrangement. But you can do it. And the way that we can do it, I think, is by giving each student a slightly different role. They don't have to be doing exactly the same thing. What they certainly don't want to be doing is just the stronger student, just showing the weaker student the answers, showing them their book. That's not going to get anyone anywhere. So I've got a few little tweaks and adjustments, and I'll just run them through you. I've got a few scribbled down here. So the first one involves conversation questions. Let's imagine the students have a set of conversation questions and they're going to be asking and answering. So the struggling student, the weaker student, asks the stronger or the advanced student, whatever terminology you like, I use them interchangeably, they ask them the questions. The advanced student answers with the most elaborate, impressive answer that they can, and then the struggling student tries to repeat some of their answer, as much of their answer as they can, back to them. Now, that's very different, but what it means is that the advanced student has an audience, they have somebody listening to them as they're practicing, that their partner is listening because their partner is going to try to repeat that back to them. So they're listening for a motive other than purely interest, admittedly. And when the struggling student repeats back, it's not 100% personalised to them because they're repeating the advanced student's answers. But we're hoping that enough of the advanced student's answers are useful language for and models for the struggling student that they benefit. So you see, each student is doing something, each learner is doing something slightly different, but each one is still being able to practice to the maximum relative to their ability. That's one little tweak. What else have I got here? Okay, let's imagine that. This is more elaborate, and like I say, it's difficult to get these things right, to make little adjustments and make sure that both people in the pair are benefiting. I've used elements of all these strategies in bits and bobs over the years. Sometimes you can do more, sometimes you can do less. It's tricky, I'm not saying it isn't, but let's say we have a set of conversation questions. We let both strong student and weaker student see the questions, and they both get preparation time, but they're doing something different. So the advanced student has a time to look for advanced vocabulary, to check online to see if there's any nice language they can use in their answers, but they're just making little notes next to the questions. The struggling student has the same questions, but they're actually writing out a basic answer. They're writing it out in full. So they both get 5 minutes to prep as many questions as they can. Then what happens? The struggling student shows the advanced student their answers written out in full. The advanced student corrects those answers with the struggling student to the best of their ability. What happens next? The advanced student comes to the teacher, and this one requires quite a lot of teacher intervention, and they show the teacher their corrections of the struggling student's text. The struggling student is also there. They will have a vested interest. The teacher then feeds back to the advanced student on their corrections of the struggling student's text. Then you can do one of two things. Those students, so the teacher is actually giving the advanced student feedback on their English, on their ability to correct a more basic text than they might actually create. So you've almost turned them into a teacher, but they're getting feedback on that. Now we can do one of two things. The two partners can go back to their places, and the struggling student can read their answers to the advanced student, and the advanced student can read their answers to the struggling student. That's okay. But the best, I think, is if we keep the students with the teacher, and the struggling student reads their answer now to the teacher and the advanced student together, and then the advanced student reads their answers, actually says their answers, they haven't prepared them, they say them back to both the struggling student and the teacher feeds back directly to the advanced student with the struggling student listening and hopefully picking more up. That's quite elaborate. So obviously for a very large class, logistically that will be quite tricky, but I'm giving you examples of how we can change the tasks, differentiate the tasks at these different levels so that both partners benefit. Next one, because I don't want this to be a massive, massive, massive clip that goes on forever. So what we have is, this is again conversation questions or exam style, speaking exam answers that they're practicing for. We have a struggling student, we have two advanced students. The two advanced students, they go through the questions with the struggling student. They get the struggling student to read the questions out, and one of them corrects the struggling student's pronunciation and models. The other advanced student makes sure that the struggling student understands the questions. So we've got two advanced students supporting a struggling student. What happens next is the struggling student gets the stopwatch, they read out the questions, and then they time one of the advanced students answering the question. And then they do the other student. Okay, they're not actually answering the questions, they're listening to model answers. If there's time, we could then have the advanced students taking it in turns to ask the struggling student a question, and one of them asks a question and the other one acts as helper. So that's another add-on. Can you see what we're doing? We're almost like a puppeteer. The teacher can be here, we can be improvising these pairings as well. We can say, okay, now can you just do this? Just try this. And we can see how far we can take it. Okay, another one. Let's say we have a struggling student and we have an advanced student. The advanced student has a blank piece of paper. The struggling student has a test, maybe a unit test, a revision test from the book, maybe part of it, and they actually read the test questions to the advanced student. The advanced student will have to go slowly, be patient, maybe ask them to repeat. And then the advanced student writes the answers to the test questions, just the answers, on a piece of paper. They then give their test answers to the struggling student. The struggling student then has the answers and they correct the advanced student's answers. So all this time they've been familiarising themselves with the questions and the answers. What we then do is we give the advanced learner has a look at their answers, obviously, and then they give the struggling student the blank test, and they just look at it, and they look at it together, and they see what the struggling student can remember from the answers. Again, they're both doing the test, but they're doing it with different levels of support, and one of them is using recall, one of them isn't. So the struggling student has more support, but the advanced student actually gets tested relative to their own level. What else? We can have, with a text, we can have the advanced learner reads a text to the struggling learner. The advanced learner reads a text whilst the struggling learner follows. Then the struggling learner asks the advanced learner any questions about meaning, questions about pronunciation. If the advanced learner doesn't know the answer, then they go to the teacher. The teacher's there to support the advanced learner, who is supporting the struggling learner. What happens then is that the struggling learner tries to translate the text to the advanced learner helps them. Once they've done that, then the advanced learner moves away, they can no longer see the text, and the struggling learner says the first 2 or 3 words of each line and of each sentence, and the advanced learner tries to remember what the sentence was. They've now seen it various times, and the struggling learner can act as prompter to help them as well. So now the advanced learner is testing their memory at a higher level. Again, each student is doing something slightly different. There are various other ways of working. For example, let's imagine that they've done some grammar exercises from the book and they've filled in gaps in sentences. Now what we can do is they can both look at, the struggling student, the advanced student can look at the full sentences together, read them to each other to familiarise themselves, and then the advanced student can take the exercise, the struggling student sees nothing, and the advanced student reads out the sentences, and when they come to the gap they just go, So one of the examples I often use, when Bilbo the cave, the dragon was sleeping, and the struggling learner has to remember entered. When Bilbo entered the cave, the dragon was sleeping. What happens then, after the struggling learner has tried to recall just the answers, the struggling learner gets the book, the advanced learner now can't see anything, and the struggling learner just says the answers. Number 1, entered. The advanced learner has to try to remember the entire sentence. It's kind of reverse hum. Entered. When Bilbo entered, and then maybe the struggling learner has to help them. The cave, the dragon was sleeping, for example. So it's and reverse . Those are some ideas. Like I say, it's fine-tuning. It's a difficult thing to get right. If you do end up deputising stronger learners and just getting them to help struggling learners, it's not the end of the world. Like I say, that is a logistical technique. It's maybe not pure differentiation. It is logistical, and it is providing support for struggling learners. So it's not entirely bad. But if you do that, what I would say is try to make sure that the advanced learner gets something out of the arrangement. It could be that at the end of it, You say, okay, thank you very much, Anna, for helping me, with Emma. What can I give you? Do you know this word? Do you know this phrase? And you tell them something that they don't know. And they go, no, I don't know that. Ah, well, that's a nice phrase that you can use in your writing or in your spoken answers in the future. Write it down, I'll check the spelling. And then the advanced learner has something. Like I say, that is like a second best. It's not perfect, but at least we've acknowledged that the advanced learner needs something out of this. Another thing that you can do is, if your advanced learner has been going around helping various people, or if they've spent a long time helping one struggling learner, you can ask the advanced learner to write a summary of what they did and how they felt being the student teacher. They can write a little paragraph if they want to, and then they can give that to you, and you can correct it so they get a little bit of teacher time as well. That's another way to make sure they get something out of the arrangement. I hope that clip has been of some use. Strength and energy with your teaching.